We were sitting around the Christmas table, laughter filling the room. My husband leaned over and whispered, "Count the plates." I glanced around confused and started counting. When I reached the last one, my hand trembled. Someone was missing. Someone they had deliberately excluded. But what I discovered that night wasn't just about an empty chair. It was about 15 years of lies, manipulation, and a family secret so devastating it would destroy everything I thought I knew about the people I trusted most. My name is Sarah, and until that Christmas dinner, I believed I was living in a perfect marriage with the perfect in-laws. I was wrong about everything. I met David when I was 23. He was charming, confident, and had this incredible family that seemed straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. His parents, Robert and Margaret, lived in a beautiful colonial house. His sister Jessica was married to a successful lawyer and had 2 adorable kids. His brother Michael was finishing medical school. My own family situation was complicated. My parents had divorced messily when I was 16. My mom struggled with depression, and my dad basically disappeared from our lives. I had a younger brother, Kevin, who'd gotten mixed up with drugs in his early 20s and spent some time in rehab. When David introduced me to his family, I felt like I was being welcomed into this perfect world where families actually functioned. Margaret would hug me and call me sweetie. They insisted I was family now, and family takes care of family. But there were little things that started to bother me. Whenever I mentioned my mom or Kevin, the conversation would quickly shift. David would take phone calls in other rooms, speaking in hushed tones. Certain family friends would look at me strangely when we ran into them. 5 years into our marriage, my mom's health started declining. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, and it was progressing fast. I wanted her to come stay with us, but David's family had other ideas. "Don't you think it would be better for your mother to be in a professional facility?" Margaret suggested. "Somewhere with trained staff." In the end, we found an assisted living facility for my mom. David's family was incredibly supportive, even contributing financially. By December, she didn't remember my name anymore. Around the same time, my brother Kevin got clean and started rebuilding his life. He was working construction, had his own apartment, and was even dating someone nice. But every time I suggested inviting Kevin to family gatherings, there was always a reason why it wouldn't work out. Next time never came. After 10 years of marriage, I started visiting my mom during lunch breaks instead of evenings, when David thought I was at work. One afternoon, a nurse named Patricia pulled me aside. "Sarah, I'm glad I caught you. Your family hasn't been by in several weeks. We've been calling the phone number on file, but no one returns our calls." "What phone number?" She showed me my mother's chart. The primary contact was David's cell phone. My number wasn't listed anywhere. "Your husband is listed as your mother's primary medical contact. He's been making decisions about her care for months." I learned that David had been receiving calls about my mother's condition for over a year. He'd signed papers agreeing to limit her physical therapy and social activities because they were too stimulating. When I confronted David about this, he had an answer for everything. Those therapy sessions were agitating her. I was just trying to protect her. These decisions should have been mine to make. "Honey, you've been under so much stress. I didn't want to burden you with every little detail. I was just trying to handle the administrative stuff." It sounded reasonable, but something felt wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Phone calls David took in other rooms. Conversations that stopped when I entered. The way his family would exchange glances when I mentioned my mom or Kevin. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I checked David's phone. What I found made me physically sick. There were dozens of text messages between David and his family members discussing my mother's situation. Messages about how to manage my visits to see her. Messages about how to convince me she was better off with less interaction. But the worst part was a group text from 6 months earlier. Sarah wanted to bring her mom to Sunday dinner. Obviously, that's not happening. God, can you imagine? Mom would have a heart attack. Already handled. I spoke to her doctor about limiting stimulation. Fewer visitors, reduced activities. She'll be more manageable that way. Perfect. Sarah doesn't need to know about the details. What about the brother? Any chance he'll become a problem? Kevin? No way. Sarah's too embarrassed by him to push for family inclusion. I've been reinforcing that narrative for years. But then I found something that made everything else look like child's play. It was a message from David to his father from 3 years earlier. Sarah's been asking questions about why we never invite Kevin to things. She thinks we don't like him because of his history with drugs. She has no idea about the real reason. Let's keep it that way. The last thing we need is for her to find out what Kevin knows. What if he tells her about seeing Jessica at the hotel? He won't. He has too much to lose. And even if he did, who would believe him? A recovering addict's word against our family's reputation. Kevin had seen Jessica at a hotel with someone who wasn't her husband. They all knew about Jessica's affair, and they were actively working to keep my brother away from family gatherings because he'd witnessed it. I spent the next week in a fog, going through the motions of normal life while processing this betrayal. But I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. 2 weeks before Christmas, I called Kevin. "Hey sis," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "How are you doing?" "Kevin, I need to ask you something. About David's family. About why you're never invited to things." There was a long pause. "Sarah, there are things about David's family that you don't know. Things that would hurt you if you knew them." "What kind of things? Can we meet for coffee? Somewhere private?" We met at a small cafe the next day. Kevin looked nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. 3 years ago, I was working a construction job downtown. "Renovating the Fairmont Hotel," he began. I was taking a break when I heard voices from one of the rooms. I recognized Jessica's laugh. My stomach dropped. I saw her coming out of a hotel room with a man. Not Tom. A man I'd never seen before. They were kissing, Sarah. This was definitely an affair. Maybe it was just once. Kevin shook his head. I kept seeing them together. Same hotel, different days. It was ongoing. So I called David, thinking he should know. What did David say? He thanked me. Said he'd handle it discreetly, that it was a family matter. Kevin's voice was strained. But weeks went by and nothing changed. Jessica was still having the affair, Tom had no idea, and David was acting like nothing happened. Maybe he talked to Jessica privately? No, Sarah, because I saw them together again. Jessica, this man, and David, the three of them having dinner like old friends. I couldn't breathe. David was with them. David isn't trying to stop Jessica's affair. He's enabling it. Kevin told me more. The man was Richard Palmer, a wealthy client of David's. Kevin suspected they were working together to extract money from Richard through the affair. After I called David about what I saw, I got a phone call from his father 2 months later. He offered me $5,000 to stay away from family events. Did you take it? Hell no. But Sarah, the fact that he offered means they all know what I saw. They're all keeping you in the dark. I spent the next few days investigating on my own. I went through David's computer when he was at work. I checked his financial records. I even followed him one afternoon when he said he was going to a client meeting. What I found was worse than an affair. David and Jessica were running a sophisticated extortion scheme. Jessica would seduce wealthy married men, David would become their financial advisor, and then they would systematically drain their accounts through fraudulent investments. The scheme worked like this. Jessica would meet married men at upscale bars, start affairs, and then introduce them to her brother-in-law, the financial advisor. David would convince these men to make increasingly risky investments, promising the profits would allow them to leave their marriages and start fresh with Jessica. Of course, the investments were fake. David was funneling their money into accounts controlled by his family. When the men realized they'd been scammed, they were too embarrassed to report it. David's entire family was involved. His parents provided seed money for fake investment accounts. Michael helped create fraudulent medical documents through his connections. Jessica's husband Tom was a lawyer who helped structure the fake companies to avoid legal liability. They were all criminals, and they'd been using my marriage as cover for their crimes for years. The worst part, I realized that every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, every holiday celebration had been a performance. They'd been sitting around the table planning their next victim while I passed the potatoes and asked about everyone's week. I'd been the perfect naive wife, never asking uncomfortable questions, always believing their explanations, providing them with a respectable family image they needed to pull off their cons. Christmas morning arrived cold and gray. I got dressed mechanically, putting on the red sweater Margaret had given me the previous year and the pearl earrings David had bought me for our anniversary. Gifts from criminals, I realized. Paid for with stolen money. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, defeated, like someone who'd spent 15 years living a lie. But today was going to be different. Today, the truth was coming out. We arrived at David's parents' house at noon. Same as always. The driveway was full of expensive cars. Jessica's BMW, Michael's Mercedes, even Tom's Audi that I now realized had been paid for with stolen money. The house looked like something from a Christmas card, perfectly decorated, warm light glowing from every window. The table was set with Margaret's good china and Christmas linens. The smell of roasting turkey filled the air. Everything looked perfect, just like it always did. But now I knew it was all built on lies. Everyone was there when we walked in. Jessica and Tom with their kids, everyone dressed in designer clothes. Michael and his wife Lisa with their 3 children, all perfectly groomed. David's aunt and uncle from Portland. The usual collection of family friends who'd become part of their inner circle over the years. 22 people. 22 place settings around Margaret's antique dining room table. Same as every year. Margaret began her traditional Christmas blessing after we sat down. Everyone held hands and bowed their heads while she thanked God for family, health, prosperity, and togetherness. I wanted to laugh at the irony, or scream. I wasn't sure which. The conversation during dinner was the usual mix of work updates, vacation plans, and gossip about mutual acquaintances. Jessica was particularly animated, telling funny stories about her kids' school activities. She was good at this performance. Really good. No one watching would suspect she was a professional manipulator who destroyed marriages for profit. About halfway through dinner, David leaned over to me. "Count the plates," he whispered. I looked at him, confused. "What?" "Count the plates." I glanced around the table, counting. When I reached 22, I stopped. Then I started counting again, more carefully. 22 plates. 22 people. But something was wrong. There was a 23rd plate. A complete place setting at the far end of the table. But the chair was empty. "Who's that plate for?" I asked David quietly. He smiled coldly. "That's for your brother Kevin." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" I invited him. I thought it was time he joined our family Christmas. "Where is he?" David shrugged. "He didn't show up. I called him this morning, and he said he couldn't make it after all." "You're lying. Ask anyone." I mentioned it to everyone. We were all looking forward to finally meeting your brother properly. Margaret nodded sympathetically. "We were so disappointed when Kevin couldn't make it, Sarah. David said he's been going through a rough patch lately." Jessica joined in. David mentioned that Kevin's been having issues with his sobriety. Probably for the best that he didn't come. They were all lying, creating this elaborate fiction about inviting Kevin when no such invitation had ever been extended. But I understood now. The empty plate wasn't about Kevin. It was about me. They were showing me exactly how powerless I was. They could create whatever narrative they wanted about my family, and everyone would believe them. They were demonstrating their control. "You know what?" I said, my voice getting stronger. "There is something I'd like to talk about." David's expression shifted. "Sarah, maybe this isn't the right time." "I think this is the perfect time." I stood up. "I'd like to talk about family. Real family. Not the fake version you've all been performing." "Sarah, dear, what do you mean?" Margaret asked. I said, looking directly at Jessica, "I'd like to talk about Richard Palmer." The silence was deafening. Jessica's face went white. David stood up abruptly. "Should I tell them about the hotel, Jessica? About the 3 years you've been having an affair while your husband sits right there?" Tom looked back and forth between us. "What are you talking about?" "Or should I tell them about the fake investments, David? About how you've been stealing money from the men Jessica seduces?" David moved toward me. "Sarah, you're having some kind of breakdown." "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have." I looked at his parents. "Did you know your children are criminals? Did you know they've been running an extortion scheme for years?" I turned back to David. "I know about all of it. The fake investment accounts. The forged documents. The money you offered Kevin to stay away from me." Jessica finally found her voice. "Sarah, I don't know what you think you know. I know that you're not having an affair because you're unhappy. You're having an affair because it's your job. Your job is to seduce married men, so David can steal their money. I looked around the table. I know that none of you have ever seen me as family. You've seen me as a useful cover for your criminal activities. I pulled out my phone. I have something you'll all find interesting. A recording of Jessica telling Richard Palmer that if he doesn't invest another $100,000, she'll tell his wife about their affair. David lunged toward me. You don't have any recording. Wanna bet? I looked at Tom. Should I play it? Jessica grabbed Tom's arm. Don't listen to her. She's having a mental breakdown. Play the recording, Sarah, Tom said quietly. I pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the room. Richard, honey, David says this investment opportunity won't be available much longer. And if we're going to have a future together, we need to secure our financial foundation. I've already given David over $300,000. Just one more $100,000, and then we'll have enough to start our new life together. What if my wife finds out about the money? Richard, what if your wife finds out about us? $100,000 is nothing compared to what you'd lose in a divorce. The recording ended. The silence was complete. That's extortion, Michael said quietly. Yes, it is. And I have dozens more recordings. I also have evidence that David has been making unauthorized medical decisions for my mother, and that you all conspired to keep my brother away from me. I walked to Kevin's empty chair and sat down. I think I'll stay right here, in the seat you set aside to mock my family. David was breathing heavily, his face purple. Sarah, you have no idea what you've just done. Good. It deserved to be destroyed. I stood up. I'm leaving now. I'm going to spend Christmas with my real family. With Kevin, who's been waiting 3 years for an invitation that was never coming. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Tom, you should check your joint accounts. I think you'll find they're significantly lighter than you expected. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Kevin's apartment, telling him everything. We ordered Chinese food and watched old movies, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I was actually with family. The next morning, I filed for divorce. 2 days later, I called the FBI Financial Crimes Unit and reported them all. A week later, I had David's name removed from my mother's medical records and transferred her to a facility that specialized in Alzheimer's care with actual qualified staff. It took 8 months for the criminal cases to work through the courts. David got 12 years for fraud and racketeering. Jessica got 8 years. Michael got 5 years for document forgery and medical fraud. His parents received probation due to their age and cooperation with investigators. The victims of their schemes got some of their money back through asset forfeiture, but most of it was gone forever. Richard Palmer lost over $400,000. 2 other men lost their retirement savings. One lost his children's college funds. Tom divorced Jessica immediately and got full custody of their children. He also recovered most of the money Jessica had stolen from their joint accounts over the years. But the real victory came 6 months later when I got a call from Detective Rodriguez, the lead investigator on the case. Mrs. Walsh, I wanted to update you on something. We've been contacted by 3 additional victims who came forward after seeing the news coverage. Your testimony helped us identify a pattern going back almost 8 years. 8 years! Your husband and his sister had been running variations of this scheme since shortly after you got married. You being the perfect wife gave them credibility they couldn't have achieved on their own. The detective explained that my marriage had been their greatest asset. Having a seemingly innocent, loving wife made David appear trustworthy to potential victims. Jessica could point to my marriage as proof that her brother-in-law was family-oriented and morally upright. I'd been their unwitting accomplice for over a decade. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter from David in prison. It was 5 pages of rage and blame, calling me vindictive and destructive. He accused me of destroying innocent lives and breaking up a loving family. The last line read, "I hope you're happy with what you've done to us." I threw it away without finishing the second page. These days, I live near Kevin's apartment. My mother's condition has stabilized with proper care. Kevin and I have dinner every Sunday, nothing fancy, just catching up and planning for the future. Sometimes I think about that Christmas dinner, about that empty plate and what it represented. They used it to show me my powerlessness, not realizing they were actually showing me the truth. That empty chair wasn't evidence of my brother's absence. It was evidence of their cruelty. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept the narrative that other people create for your life. Sometimes you have to count the plates yourself and trust what you see, even when everyone around you insists you're wrong. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe. These real-life accounts take time to research and tell properly, and your support helps me continue sharing these powerful stories. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below.